when it comes to student learning outcomes and perceptions about schools, there is a general perception that private schools are often better than the public schools, maybe rightly so. But are children in our private schools really learning really well? We did a study in 2007 which was called as the student learning study in metros. Here we looked at learning levels in some of the best schools among the 5 metros. We asked the public to actually vote and for the top schools in their metros, and we identified the schools like that and carried out the study. And the study revealed a number of alarming insights. What we found was that in the top schools of our country, children were learning, but they were learning what we call as a rote learning method. And they were not able to apply their what they learned, and they were not able to display any evidence of learning with understanding, and they also had difficulties in practical competencies like map reading or measurement or even writing skills and so on. So this study sort of brought it to the light for the first time that children in the best schools are not really learning well to the extent which we expect or the general perception seems to be, and showed that there were some difficulties and issues that were related to the learning that is happening in the best schools. So this study we actually repeated in 2010, and we call this as the quality education study. The quality education study not only looked at student learning outcomes, it also looked at expanding the notions of quality to also take in students' attitudes and values, and also to check whether there are specific learning environments which are contributing towards quality, and if so, what are those parameters that are there in those environments which contribute to this quality. Now let us look at the learning outcomes aspect itself. In both the studies, about 64 schools were common schools. And out of those common schools and the test papers, about 54 items, that is questions, were common across all the papers. And what we found was the learning outcomes in 2010 in the same schools on the same questions tested was comparatively lower than the student learning level which we found in 2007. And what causes this drop in learning is something that needs to be explored, but what it showed was that there is further erosion of this learning outcome, or what we call as the quality of learning. So 2007 itself showed that children were learning by rote, and a further erosion in those actually says that the learning levels are dropping further. In the quality education study, we also looked at how children were performing in some of the international questions. So we included questions from studies like TIMSS, that is the Trends in Mathematics and Science study, which is a study where multiple countries participate every 4 years. And similarly in the language, from the Progress in Reading Literacy study called the PEARLS for the class 4 level. So the TIMSS included maths and science questions in class 4 and 8. Again, some of the insights which we saw were really surprising for us. We also included a few questions like that in the 2007 study. But the previous study actually showed that our children are far below the international average when you are looking at learning level at class 4. In this study, we also included questions not only in class 4 but also at the class 8 level. And what we found was that at the class 8 level, children were actually catching up with the international average, though at class 4 they were behind the international average.
Students in top schools of India performed lower than the international average on questions used from studies such as Trends in International Maths and Science Study, TIMSS, and Progress in Reading Literacy Study, PEARLS, at the class 4 level.
Now, how is this happening? So we looked at what is happening, what is the shift that is happening, and we found that the actual insight is in when you look at the type of questions that the children were able to answer. When it comes to a procedural question or a question that is involving a definition, a formula, or application or crunching numbers, our children are doing far better than the international average. They are somewhere quite high compared to the international average scores. But when it comes to a question which requires application, reasoning, displaying learning with understanding and so on, we are performing far poorly compared to the international average. But because we are doing so well in what we call as the procedural learning or the rote learning, and not so well in the learning with understanding, we are sort of averaging out, and we are coming somewhat on par with the international average.
Let's look at some questions used for international comparison. Shown here are 2 questions. The class 4 question requires students to apply the appropriate operation to arrive at the answer, whereas the Class 8 question expects them to identify the correct procedure. Class 4 Indian students performed lower than their international counterparts, whereas Class 8 students performed better than their international counterparts.
You will also know that India participated in studies like PISA, the Progress in Student Achievement Study, which is again an international study for 15-year-olds. And 2 states from India, Tamil Nadu and Himachal Pradesh, participated in the study. And the results showed that out of the 70 odd countries that participated, we were one among the last. And the question is that, so therefore learning levels is not an issue only for the government school system, but also for the private school system, because even in PISA study the private schools also participated.
It was observed that students exhibit rote learning and perform comparatively better in questions that are procedural or do not involve deeper understanding or application of concepts. Let's look at an example. Here is a simple question asking students to figure out what happens to the area of a strip of paper when it is cut and arranged in a different way. Since there is no overlap between the 2 pieces, the total area would remain the same, just as that of the original sheet. However, only 45% of the students seem to be getting this correct. It was also observed that using good language while writing, measurement, general awareness of well-known facts, practical competencies such as map reading, etc. are not developed well. Let's look at some examples. When asked to measure the length of a pencil in a non-standard way, that is, when the starting point is not aligned to the 0 mark, only 16% of the students were able to answer the question correctly. Only 38% of students know that Sonia Gandhi is alive today. 34% of students think that Indira Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi are alive today. And there were some students who even thought that Mahatma Gandhi is alive today.
So this is again bringing the question to our mind. So are our children learning really well? Are they learning what they need to do in the 21st century? Because 21st century is a century of what one would call as portable skills. It's a knowledge economy, and whatever new knowledge, thinking out of the box, creative thinking, critical thinking and making connections in real life, these are very, very important in how a nation progresses. So if our children are doing so poorly when it comes to an application question, a reasoning question or learning with understanding type of question, then what it sort of reveals is that our children are not really becoming thinkers. If our children are not becoming thinkers, then we are not going to do well when it comes to what I call as the portable skills, which is needed for the 21st century. And this is something which we as educationists should worry and do something about.